delighted to welcome everyone to the latest DC Referees Developmental Zoom. Tonight, we are doing maximizing assessments and mentoring value on the grounds that we think that this is helpful and valuable, interesting, and hopefully most of this content is new and unique. And the reason we're talking about this is I don't think anyone's really gotten a handle on how should an assessment go. To that point, I've got 3 interesting video clips on the left side of the screen that talk about how an assessment can go, should go, and people may have differing opinions about what it's really supposed to be like. On the one hand, maybe you're comparing something of value to a bag of sand and trying to figure out if you can get the weight exactly correct because the rock will never figure out which one is which. You may decide to just take the valuable thing and get out there, get out of there and leave your friends behind because, wait for it, nothing's going to stop you. Unfortunately, running without your teammates may lead you to an untimely end. And third, maybe you just need to take your loot and go because otherwise the poison darts will hit you. And so to this point, we have gathered a very interesting array of panelists to speak to these topics. Tonight, we've got Vince DiNardo from California South, Ty Hine from Mississippi, Kevin Nicholson from West Virginia, and I am here tonight representing Virginia. Now, I say representing loosely because I'm going to note that all the participants in the presentation today are expressing their personal opinions. They are not speaking on behalf of U.S. Soccer or for any state referee committee. The topics that we're going to hit tonight are the types of assessments, assessment preparation, converting the assessor or mentor to a champion, video decomposition, mastery videos, the role of the assigner, recovering from the challenges, and Q&A. Now, there's a special challenge here tonight that I am throwing out to the group. You will see on many slides in this presentation, video stills from very popular and interesting movies. If you can correctly identify every still from a movie to the actual name of the movie and email it to me by the end of the night at 11 p.m. EST at wahooref@gmail.com, I will send you a check for $25 to commend your mastery of such a topic. Other ground rule for tonight, beyond the verbal bounty that I'm offering, is to note that if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will address them at the end. So this is the first of 2 video snapshots of who's on this panel. We're talking very, very briefly about where we are from. I really don't want to spend too much time talking about our bios, but hopefully our audience, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, both our audience and our panelists, can see that hopefully we have something to contribute. And we'll also make sure that our emails are available to people for follow-up if you have questions or comments after we finish. And so I will go ahead and just launch a discussion of the type of assessments and mentoring. And this is still part of our ground rules tonight. There are both formal assessments and informal assessments. While they're hopefully about the same expectation and outcome, they are different. The Ussf assessment is formal. It is required for Ussf upgrade and maintenance. It is routinely happening in professional matches and by referee requests, amateur and youth matches. The costs on the amateur side are paid for by the center referee, and it happens at the league level. They assume the costs. There's also the developmental guidance feedback, or a DNG. It doesn't have any use for USSF formally, but the idea is that it can help the person who's being on that crew learn what they're doing well and give them ideas of things that they can work on and weaknesses that they can turn into strengths. It can be paid for by anyone. There should be written outputs that are shared with the referee and potentially the assigner. And the kicker here is that it may be based upon partial match observation or all of it. Similarly, there's also the training or match watch. Again, it has no use for USSF formally, but it could be educational. It's scheduled by the instructor and assigner referee association for demonstration purposes. The costs get nowhere near the referee. The verbal feedback is almost the only one that we're going to get. And we may involve multiple mentors and a Q&A with an unassigned referee audience. Now, what actually comes in a formal assessment, and I'm going to just make a blanket statement that we're going to use assessments and mentoring somewhat interchangeably after I get through the discussion of these differences. So I ask that people just bear with us. In a formal USSF assessment, there are 4 possible outcomes that I know of. The assessor concludes that a match was a sufficient test and the referee satisfied the requirements. The referee didn't satisfy the requirements for maintenance or upgrade. There just simply isn't enough information with respect to how well the referee measures against those standards for grade, maintenance, or upgrade, or the match was not rateable. If you actually don't get through the full 90-minute game because there's an abandonment, a termination, there's the AR that is missing, or there's a forfeit, well, that was nice that you paid for the assessor to come out, but it doesn't count. And with that, I'm going to turn over control to Vince DiNardo, our expert from California South, to talk about how he recommends we prepare for assessments. Vince?
How you doing, guys? Sorry, my daughter just walked in. I do not. Go ahead. Sorry about that. Want to cover on the previous slide. I am under the understanding now that if you get to 90 minutes, the match must be considered rateable, efficient, or a sufficient test. There's no longer saying the game doesn't count anymore. I know some states are still doing that, but when I went through the regional ref coach program, they said every game should count still. If it's an easy game, it should be listed as easy and a score of 70 passing. We'll get in more of that later, but prep for an assessment preparation. Little bit of background on me, 33 years. I think when I pulled up the referee portfolio on game officials since 2009, I think I have 175 assessments listed there right now. I've gone through this process quite a bit. Some things that you want to go through, I highly admit that the probably biggest point is when the referee gets the assignment and knows that he's going to be assessed, let your crew know. Let your crew know what's expected. The last thing you want to do is have somebody showing up for an assessment and they've done 5 games beforehand and they have no wheels left to help you out in your game, and it's going to affect the entire team. Mind you, even though the referee might be the one looking for the upgrade, the entire crew is the one that's going to be assessed. So the entire crew is going to get scored, and it will affect if one of those referees is not up to speed. So very, very important. They get the information to your ARs as soon as possible. Let them know that it's going to be assessed. Let them know what time you want them to be there. At least 45 minutes for an amateur match. I highly recommend 60 minutes minimum for any match if you're going to have an assessment, so that you can have a good pregame, especially if it's somebody you haven't worked with. If it's a crew you've worked with, maybe that can do the 45 minutes and get through it. That's a pretty good situation there. Know what outcome you're looking for. Make sure the other crew members are on the same page. That goes back to, no one should be surprised about the assessment is planned. Know the star players. Do your research. With the advent of YouTube, and if you have access to Instat, if you're doing games on, if it's an amateur game, your leagues probably have games online in some place. Take a look at the teams. I'm not saying you have to watch the full 90-minute games, but take a look to see some time in the games, know who the star players are, know what you're dealing with, do a little bit of background. I usually, for me, I send out an email to my crew before the game. I say, this is the teams we have, this is their records, these are the goals that have been scored, goals against. Know if you're going to have an offensive game, defensive game, see if they've played before. Some of these leagues, you can actually see the match report from the game before. You'll know exactly who was carded. You'll know who your troublemakers are. You'll know who your goal scorers are. Do your research on these games beforehand. I highly recommend that. Notify the assessor if there's any changes to match details. I actually went out to do an assessment, showed up at the field, no one was there. And and nobody bothered to tell me that one, the game had been canceled and moved to the next day someplace else. So keep the crew involved, but also let your assessor know, because they typically don't get that same notification that you do if a game has been changed. I think this next one's really, really important, especially for the regional assessors. Ask your peers if anybody has had prior relationships with the USSF assessor or ref coach, and if so, details. A lot of ref coaches and assessors have their own quirks. They all have something that they tend to look at a little bit more than, say, somebody else does. I know we used to have one assessor that he was really, really big on making sure that on throw-ins, the guy didn't walk up 10 yards. And a way to get a really quick bonus point was if you really early hit that whistle and backed him up 5 yards. That was one way to get a really big, attaboy from the assessor. So talk to the people, know what their little quirks are, know what they look for, but at the same time, try not to referee the match for the assessor. Just be aware of, most of these assessors are going to know that the key match incidents, the critical match incidents, that's what they're looking for. They're not going to fault you because you didn't check the nets the right way, or you didn't hand the ball to somebody. I'm saying these are things I had written up in my assessments in my past, but that's not something that's going to cause you to fail. So do your game, because remember, the purpose of this assessment is so you can get better, not so you can get a passing grade. So do your game the way you want to do it. And if there's stuff that needs to be corrected, take the feedback from the assessor and, address it if you want to. And as we'll talk later, if it's stuff that you don't like, maybe we have to go a different route with that. If weather's a factor, I live in Southern California. The only weather we have is if it's hot. Plan for the place to have after your debrief. If you can't do it at the field, maybe you guys grab a bite to eat. Also depends on your schedule. If you're a referee, try not to schedule your assessment game to be the third game in the day where you've run for 2 games. Also, if you're doing an assessment, try not to do multiple games in the day. Try to give it all your best effort on that one. And another thing, set up your referee gear away from the benches. I think this is a good any game that you do, unless there's a spot for you, at the center where they tell you this is your spot. Try to stay away from everybody, because if you are talking at halftime, you're all having this, mid-game debrief. The last thing you want to do is have the benches hearing what you're talking about, especially if you're talking about the problem child on one team. So those are probably the big things for me. Go to the next slide. Things to bring. Obviously, bring your USSF uniforms, preferably washed. I'm not going to say pressed, but let's make sure they don't look like they've been sitting on the floor for a month. A notebook or a record for your debrief notes. This is something that I got from Carrie Seitz many moons ago. She has a list of every game she's ever done, and she takes notes on how she felt, how some of the key match incidents that happened, and then any assessor notes on it. And she has literally a stack of notebooks from everything that she's done. I don't do mine in notebooks. I take my notes on the game card, and then I transfer them onto my computer when I come home. The USSF ID card. This is another reason why you need to talk to your ARs. They have to bring their ID cards too, so they can be found in the system, so the report can be written. So, pardon me. Dog was carded for descent. So bring your USSF ID card for your ARs as well. So they can be found in the system and they can get their reports written as well. Print a copy of the league rules, the rules of competition. This is very important. I just sent out a thing on my site. I think it was a week ago. We had an FA Cup match in England, where the referee did a sin bin. They sat somebody for 5 minutes, and the FA Cup does not allow for sin bins. So the result of that is now they have to replay the game. The last thing as a referee you want to be responsible for is screwing up something that's going to cause to have a replay. So know the rules of competition. If it's a U.S. soccer event, they're all on the game officials webpage. Download the referee handbook, take it with you in case there's an issue. Next one. That's you, Jesse.
Yep. So I'm going to talk about how to take the assessor and mentor that you've just met, who is in the position of having substantial influence over your refereeing career, and go from a chance meeting and making them a champion for you as a referee in your refereeing career. And I wish somebody had explained this to me when I was younger. Now, for the most part, we're all better off doing things together. Now, if you're Russell Crowe, facing an arena of 10 bloodthirsty gladiators may not be so intimidating. If you have a whole bunch of prison guards behind you, getting ready to be thrown off of a 5-story building with no net may not be too daunting. On the other hand, can you ever have too many friends? Think about it. The assessors, the crew members, instructors, and mentors, everyone has relationships. They're in a position to provide references about your past performance. They can make introductions to new leagues, assignors, and tournaments that you want to work. They can provide clearance for more competitive assignments, get you into academies, delegations from your state. They can even help you with transportation, getting to and from things. So instead of saying, okay, I can only go to tournaments within the next 10 miles. Oh, look, we're chartering a bus because we all have friends and there's a spare seat on the bus. And now we can go to Florida or Michigan, California, or New York. It also helps the assessor because it renews your sponsoring organization's credibility. If they're from the SRC, the assignment group, or referee group, if they've said this particular referee is going to be the next Mark Geiger, and lo and behold, he or she can execute that. And that performance reflects well the judgment of whoever it is who's originating the recommendation. It's also important to understand that assessors and mentors are not adversaries of the referee crew. They're there, they have a job to do, and they deserve the presumption of integrity. I have heard several times of people who have a bias. They don't like me. They have some sort of unintentional obstacle that allows them to make a fair judgment. And I would just recommend not assuming that that's a problem for you, because then that's going to get you off of the game that you're about to do and worrying about something that you cannot control. Also important to remember that the mentors are providing a snapshot evaluation, not a final judgment. And there's going to be more assessors, more mentors, and frankly, every time you're at a soccer field, you are being watched. So if you know that you're going to run into them again, because ultimately our referee community is a small world, how do you want your next encounter to go? And that is entirely within your control as an official. There is a way to do this, and I have it called methodology. I am a big believer in writing thank you notes, at least an email, as soon as you get to a computer, and then write a snail mail message if you have the moment and the opportunity. I think it's important to treat mentors and assessors how you would want to be treated. And if a mentor or assessor gives you some really great insights, tell their supervisors and saying, this mentor or assessor is making a big difference in my refereeing path. More of that, please. I think it's also important to remember not to assume that anything is owed or earned. And if you need guidance for them, have respect for their time too, because recognize that we're all busy. But if you ask nicely, you're more likely to get what you need. And I'm also a gigantic believer in reciprocity of the courtesy in the relationship, because that's what ultimately makes things last. Thank you, Mr. Miyagi. And part of that relationship building is simply paying it forward. I am pleased to identify Rick Eddy because I believe that he is a gigantic advocate of helping other people the way that he was helped when he was younger as an official. I think that altruism is a good thing. If you remember to being kind as you're going up your ladder in the refereeing career, that if you happen to find yourself going a little bit down and decelerating, that you will also be treated with kindness and appreciation. And the question to ask is, what is your future pathway? What reputation do you want to have? And I think that more people are aware of how you act than you could possibly know. And that is a factor whether or not you get invited to subsequent opportunities that you want. And now I am going to tag in Vince again to talk about video decomposition.
Key match incidents. I like how you started this. Key match incidents are inflection points or moments where the referee crew decision by commission or omission either accepts the match on track or sends the match towards a disaster. These are the key match incidents. These are things that happen in a game that change the temperature of the game or have the potential to change the temperature of the game, either by not being recognized by the referee or being incorrectly recognized by the referee. These are what ref coaches, mentors, assessors are looking for. They don't care if you miss a throw in at midfield and you point the wrong direction. They're looking for important foul decisions, free kicks near the penalty area, reckless tackles, excessive force tackles that are, treated as a reckless tackle, fouls that are close to the technical area, close to the powder keg. Typically, all cautions or send-offs are going to be listed as key match incidences. Injuries to the key players, goals. There's a reason why VAR looks at every goal. Coach outbursts, really helpful if you have a fourth official. Easy thing to help the fourth official to be evaluated or assessed on. All penalty kick decisions, or not just penalty kicks, but the decisions not to give a penalty kick, mass confrontations, or any spectator incidents. So anything that can have the game go into disrepute. That's what you want to be looking at. Make sure you get the big decisions correctly. And when you have the big decisions, then we can look back and see where there's small decisions that were made or not made that led to a bigger decision. So that's how we kind of deconstruct, if a key match incident is missed, why? Okay. Next one. So when I look at breaking down videos, I think video breakdown is extremely important for a referee to advance. I think there's a couple of things that you need to look at. First thing, and it's not mentioned here specifically, but forget what the referee did on the field. That's not important. When you're looking at video clips, whether you're looking at the YouTube page for key match incidents, or you're at a clinic and they're showing and deconstructing video analysis, when you're looking at what happens on the screen from the referee standpoint is irrelevant. What you want to look, and you want to take a look at a snapshot of what happened on the clip. Note, the first thing is to, you want to take a look at the time of the match. What's the, when you're doing a game in solo, you want to take note. And if you're using ref talk, the way I operate this is I tell my fourth official to log times. If I'm an AR, a really close offside decision, hey, note 36 minute, note that, and get those after the game. But if you have stuff on them, again, if you can watch yourself on video, it's important. But look at the set pieces, corner kicks, and note the timing of the match. Know if there's an adjustment because it's early on the match or later because you're getting an idea of what the teams are doing. Notice the way that the entire crew is positioned at each key match incident. You might have a situation on a counterattack when you might see that an AR is making a different type of movement down the line to help out the referee until he gets there. And then lastly, note the referee decision, not for right or wrong, but to get an understanding of why the decision was made. So when we go back and we look at the clips, what was the best decision? forget again what the referee made. We want to take a look at what is the correct decision. When you have video, the thing is to get the decision correct. So what's the correct decision and why? That's what the first and main point that you're trying to get through. If there's a difference between the optimal referee decision and what the referee did, don't skewer the referee for saying that they missed it. Why? Find out what happened. Was it a counterattack? Did they get caught behind a player? Or were they just not focused? Or if it's an AR, were they just lazy and not in line with the second to last opponent? What was the reason for that? Is there a way that they could have corrected that decision by being in a better position on the field? Was it just as simple of they just misread the play? They went one way and then went the other way. They zigged, they zagged. And then see if the positioning, the way that the referee positioned himself influences the next decision. And they get caught going too far into the corner, and now they get caught on a counterattack. Did they deal with the player, or they saw a foul, they blew the whistle, treated it like a simple foul, quick little tweet, but didn't recognize that the players were getting upset and maybe a word needed to be done, to have with them. Maybe you needed to chew the player a little bit or make it look bigger to let everybody know you saw where this was going. Again, look at the referee AR teamwork function. Do they appear to be on the same page? Are they crossing signals on fouls? Is one popping the flag and getting waved down? These are things that you want to take a look at. Why? And then the most important one is, especially early on in a match, did the players accept the decision or did they respond negatively? Now, on the big matches like we see on TV, you see them crowd the referee, you see them all yelling, and we all yell at our screen saying don't allow them to do that. This is a way that says how can we fix these situations when we're looking at a video? Is this something that we can treat earlier and address, or is this something that just happens in the game that we have to stamp out universally? Different subject, different time. I can get there for a month. And then the last thing is there lessons to be learned? Every game that you do, unless it's a forfeit, you can learn from. I'll even go as far as some forfeits you can learn from. But what can we learn from breaking down a video clip? What can we learn about our game? It's very easy to watch a clip and say, hey, the referee's in the right position, the referee got the right angle, the referee got the right decision. But then you have to look inside yourself and say, would I have been in that position? And be honest, because if you're lying, you're only lying to yourself. So would you be able to get into that position? Would you follow that same track? Or would you follow something differently? And maybe that might put you in a better position than what that referee was in. So you want to use it as a gauge on how you can be a better referee, how you can find a better position, how you can read the game. Because that's all this comes down to is, can you read the game to be in the right spot, to see the right challenge at the right time, to make the right decision? So next slide. This goes into more detail what we're looking for when we're looking at a full match by yourself. If you're looking at a match solely on yourself, you're watching your game, you want to track the key match incidents, note the time or note the positioning. And it doesn't have to be your game that you're watching. If you're watching a game by yourself, this is what you want to note down. Chart set pieces, corner kicks, and note the referee positioning. On the set pieces, what you really want to take a look at is it on the referee's diagonal? Is it closer to the AR? Is, who's going to be responsible for the wall management? If you set up the wall and then move away, can the AR adequately handle the wall and the offside positioning? If you have a fourth official, can you walk the fourth official down to manage the wall? Or is it going to be a situation where you're setting up the wall on the referee's diagonal and the referee's left to do a little bit of everything at that time? Watch how they modify their positioning depending on where those set pieces are. And then ask a mentor or a peer to watch the video and then compare logs. This is something I didn't do for a long time, and I can say honestly, this has been huge. One of the first USL games I got, I thought we absolutely crushed the game. I thought we rocked it. And we sat down the next day with the referee, and me and the referee and we went through every decision that we had. And it was just amazing. It took forever, I won't lie, but it was really nice to see how many decisions, whether we blew the whistle or he blew the whistle, he didn't blow the whistle, throw in, goal kick, offside decision, foul, contact, see how many of those that we said, okay, well, we've taken that back, but we've allowed this to go. Really, really important to see how somebody else views your game, because we're going to either be our worst critic or we're going to sugarcoat it. We're never really going to give us the true feedback to ourselves. So, and then the best thing is, are you watching the same match? Had a game last night where the assessor was very nice to the referee after the game. And I honestly felt that the game I was a part of and the assessor was not on the same page. We weren't on the same match. And so I called the assessor this morning. We had a conversation and realized we were. He was being nice at the time because the referee had a little bit of a struggle. So we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page. We don't, an assessor's job is not to beat you down and tell you did a bad job when you didn't have a great game. Their job is to teach you, to build you back up so that you can have a better game the next time. And that's important, especially the last line here. If you have a blind spot, you're not going to find it watching the clip of yourself. I'm just going to be honest with you. You're not going to find your own blind spots until somebody brings it up to you. When somebody brings it up to you, then you can then go back and take a look at it and say, yeah, now you can fix it. So very, very important to have somebody else look at your matches as well. That's another reason to have a good assessor, mentor, ref coach, whatever you want to call them. Take a look at your games. Next.
Cool. It's back to me again. Ha ha ha. So I'm going to talk about making a mastery video. What on earth is a mastery video? The idea here is what's called a higher level knowledge. There are some technical terms for it that I'm not going to repeat because I paid very richly for my college education. But the idea here is to take your key match incident when it happened, remember your instinctive approach, and then if you sat with a mentor or a coach, an assessor or a peer, and they gave you an alternative, try it, see if it makes sense, and if you like it, then see if you can pass that same guidance on to somebody else. Because if you can actualize the information, it's more likely to have stuck in your brain as opposed to letting you get to a similar incident later on in your refereeing career and you find yourself doing things the same way as opposed to internalizing the lesson that you wanted to learn. It also is paying it forward. And what you see on the screen is one of our newer bright lights in Virginia, Akash Fuel, making his first mastery video talking about managing player temperature. And it also, if you can identify which mentor gave it to you, you show them the video, they'll actually be able to tell you whether or not you got the right lesson from it, or if you're two ships in the night and you never have gotten onto the same page. So I think that this is a really, really powerful tool. It's a very, very inexpensive tool too, as well, because you can take the video on your phone, if you have a smartphone, put it up on YouTube, and all of a sudden you've got a benchmark in your refereeing career when you learn the lesson, did I learn the right lesson? And you, again, further your relationship with your mentor, your coach, or your assessor. And then the bigger question here is, how big is your mastery video library? Are you adding to it? Are you repeating the same lessons? Are you checking out the same books over and over again? Are you looking at new videos to learn new things? How important is it to you to prevent another referee from making a similar mistake? Or if you're making a mastery video to demonstrate what you think you did correctly, do that. And if you keep enjoying making mastery videos, consider taking the referee, coach, instructor, or assessor course. And if you want to take this up 10,000 feet, this presentation is in fact a mastery video. It is not one that belongs to me or to Vince, Kevin, or Ty, but we're all pouring what we've internalized over our respective referee careers and seeing how we can pay it forward. So the difference is micro to macro. And with that, it is time for Kevin Nicholson to talk about the role of the assigner.
All righty. You're going to need an assigner relationship to get a successful assessment. I'm not sure, Vince can probably speak to how it is in California, but in West Virginia, we actually have a state director of assignment. So the process for the referee is to contact that state director of assignment and say, hey, I need a maintenance upgrade. And he will provide you with an assessor, a referee coach, as they are now. They will say the referee coach has, the following availability. If you get the match, he'll be there. So then how do you get the match? You have to communicate with an assigner. So you have to reach out and say, hey, I need a maintenance assessment. Hopefully the assigner knows you by that point because you've cultivated that relationship. Because as assigners, we're sitting here with a menu of assignments that we can give. We know more or less, we know what game's going to be competitive, what game's going to be a real good test, what game that could set you in the best situation to succeed. So you have to communicate between the referee and the assigner. And the referee, it's huge to communicate to the assigner because we will set you up for success rather than failure by trying to put you on the appropriate match that you're using for the appropriate reasons. And I stress that if it's a maintenance match, I might not give you the highest temperature match out there. I may give you just a good, match that'll be a test of your skills, but I'm not looking to kill anybody or kill anybody's career. Maintenance is about making sure you're proficient. Now, if you tell me you're a 19 or 20-year-old that's trying to break into a regional, I'm going to give you an upgrade match that is going to be a true test of whether you can handle a regional level match. And I'm going to tell you that up front. So communication. It's the burden is on the referee, not the assigner, to pay for the assessment if it is a maintenance or an upgrade. And it is not on the assigner to give you the information. You need to follow that up for yourself. Ask the assigner if you haven't asked your assessor, where's this information going to be? Where can I find it? And to that point, the standard has always been, as far as what you're, at least in West Virginia, what you pay for a maintenance or an upgrade assessment is whatever your match fee is. So if you make $70 for that match, that's what is expected from the assessor. But you need to work that out in advance with your referee coach or assessor so that everyone is on the same page. Do they require you to bring the payment to them at the time of the match? What their expectation is. Next slide, Jesse. Assigner, mentoring facilitator. Tournament scheduling. The assigners, when it comes to the tournament, are involved in the crew selection for academy or standalone mentor assignments. The assigner may be involved in mentor recruitment, which prioritizes of which the league officials need monitoring. That's something else. Assigners, we're constantly trying to recruit not only referees, but mentors as well. And when we get those mentors, we're going to assign the mentors to the appropriate matches based a lot of times on what you've asked for as a referee or what you've cultivated that relationship with the assigners before. As Vince mentioned earlier, tournaments are probably not the best, the best overall time to get an assessment, because there's no way you're going to be fresh unless it's your very first game of the day. It may be a necessary evil because that may be the only time that you can get a referee coach in that situation. But it's just something to take into consideration. And assigners may supply past performance information for individual wrestlers to mentor in advance of assignment. Assigners talk. We're going to, let the referee know that, hey, this is the mentor. This is what the mentor likes. Like Vince said, some mentors do different things. We may communicate information to you about the crew that we provided you, that, hey, I've got you two really hot, good ARs for this upgrade match. An assigner acts as a champion for the referee for getting systematic access to match mental reports. Just, we're on your side as the assigners. If you make my life easy, I'm going to make your life easy. I'm going to be your champion. I'm going to put you out there in places to succeed. And the assigner is also a pivot point for supplying contact information between the referee crew and the mentor. That is to say, hey, where can I find my force phone number? And I may say, hey, it's in US game officials, or it's in game officials, or I help you find it. the mentor might need your contact information. We're kind of the rodeo clown or the guy with the top hat who facilitates everything at the circus. So next. Ussf Assessment. Yeah, some of this stuff has changed, like Vince said. It must be a sanction, but it must be a sanctioned match. It must be assigned by a sanctioned and licensed assigner, and the assessor must now be its referee coach or national referee coach. Referee mentors are not able to do formal assignments. It has to be a referee coach or a national coach. My understanding is all the old legacy assessors were required to take the new referee coach course in order to be current, in order to be able to give you that level of assessment. Make sure, 360 communication, if you're trying to upgrade to regional, then, a referee coach is able to do that, provided your state association will accept that a referee coach's feedback. If you're trying to get to the national level, I believe it has to be a national referee coach now, but Vince can correct me if I'm wrong. But make sure that you understand that you have the appropriate level and that the assigner is appropriately licensed in order for it to count in the system. They've done away with the sufficiently competitive. As long as it goes 90 minutes, I believe it counts, and there's not a forfeit, and you've got a full referee crew. And there's no modification of the laws. Like in our every area, we do open co-ed soccer where there's no slide tackling. That, I believe, would make that match ineligible, but Vince, once again, can correct me if I'm wrong. Soccer expert assessment, when conditions are met, 1 assessment per day, calendar buffer between assignments. USL system, I think, uses, they don't want a game the day before or the game at the day after. They'll let you know what those expectations are. An advance notice of assessment requests and payment of assessment fees. Like I said, work that out with the assessor. Make sure that they understand, you both understand the fee, you both understand what type of assessment it is. The assigner facilitates by assigning the referees that need the assessment, selecting capable assistant referees, or if you're on the line, selecting the other referees in your crew, allocating sufficient time for assessment. That's another reason why the tournaments aren't the greatest. They did a very good job at East Regionals this year when I was providing my service as a referee coach, that they scheduled the crews game on, game off, game on, game off. So we were able to let them go get a drink. And then I had a good block of 25, 30 minutes to sit and actually talk to the crews. That's not usually the case in your run-of-the-mill tournament, as you guys know. You're doing 3 to 4 games back to back, trying to shove a hot dog in where you can, and back to the field you go. The other thing, the assigner can provide you with the adaptive league rules and just the general rules of competition of that competition that you're going to be working that evening. Assigner is also your person that can communicate schedule changes. It happens. We get a call half an hour before saying the game got bumped a half an hour back or whatever. It's the referee will be the assigner will facilitate all of that contact and communication. Next, Jesse. The assigner is the consumer of mentoring data. Jesse and I both, and Vince to some extent, if he assigns as well, are likely dealing with a large pool of referees, and it's nearly impossible for us to know who every referee is at every step of the game. This mentoring data allows us confirmation that the referee is capable of officiating a type of match. It gives us an idea of what their areas of improvement are. And if a league match was not significantly competitive, the assigner needs to know for future assessments in that league. Perfect example, I've got a league around here that it's just a fun, it's an adult league, but it's a rec level adult league. I went up to doing a game for the assigner just out of courtesy, because he's a friend of mine and we work back and forth with each other. I end up showing up, there ends up 7 people on each side. They move the goals to the top of the penalty area and they have fun for 30 minutes. Wouldn't have known that about this league, but I then asked the assigner, he goes, oh yeah, that's usually how it goes. So shame on me for not answering that question beforehand. But I now know that I wouldn't put anybody in that league necessarily for an assessment. Jesse? Is Ty out of his heat delay yet?
Ty is still in heat delay, or the match that he is. So I'm gonna just stay up front that this is not about me taking things from Ty. I am backfilling for him. I'm going to do my best to communicate the points that he has laid out, which I think are good ones. And if there are questions, please feel free to ask me or Ty. I'll be happy to work with you. And we're going to be talking about how to recover from some challenges. There's going to be that time when the absolute worst thing that happens in a soccer match happens to be happening in front of an assessor. And when an assess match becomes a war story, you're either shaking your head or you're smiling that you got your way through the battle. But you need to be responsible for the choices that you made as an official and the outcomes that happened. We all saw it. We all need to be responsible for it and deal with it. And you have to be honest about it, because otherwise you can't recover that if there's a problem. It is a perfectly valid answer to say, I don't know, as opposed to guessing, unless you're going to say, I'm guessing. But you don't want to pretend to be something or do something that you're not when the match was a struggle. In general, being humble is a good thing. If you had a rough match, being arrogant or stubborn is not going to win you any friends. And this is a good time to learn and listen. And remember, the assessment is just a snapshot in time. It is not a final judgment. It is not a verdict. Hopefully nobody's going to jail. And I think it's also good to note that you'll never walk alone. You rise or fall as a crew. There's always going to be another tomorrow. There's always going to be another match. And this doesn't mean that you need to go and burn your referee uniform and scorch the ground behind you. Let's say that you had an assessment where it was a rough match, you got through it. There are still ways to destroy what happened, whatever good, and just incinerate it. If you run off after the match and don't bother listening to the assessor at the debrief, that'll do it. If you fail to listen or answer reasonable questions from the mentor or the assessor, it will not help. Arguing with the assessor or mentor, there's no way to win. Don't lie. Being rude is not going to get you anything. And if you make a challenge to the assessor while not listening to the content of what he or she has to say, that is also not going to help you. An explosion is not an unreasonable outcome if that's where the path that you're on. And you know, there are going to be some times when you're at a match with an assessor and he or she tells you something that directly contradicts what you learned last week. And there's nothing that you can do about it other than to not overreact to what is said. Reflect on what was said. Maybe there's a nuance there that needs greater emphasis. Maybe the mentor or the assessor that you're working with that day has a different vantage point than someone else who is looking at the match from the eyes of the AR, and you have to allow for that. Assessors are human too. It is perfectly okay to ask more questions, get more information, so that you're getting the value from the assessment. Otherwise, what's the point? And again, and this is my final time I'm going to say this, there's no need to argue because there's no way to win. The only thing that you're doing is stopping yourself from learning something valuable, because eventually, if you keep arguing, the assessor's going to put their pad back on their backpack and say, thank you very much. There's nothing else for them to explain either, because your ears aren't open to listening.
Can I jump in here real quick, Jesse?
100%, Vince.
I think this is probably the most important part of when you're getting feedback that you might disagree with. You have to remember that a lot of these ref coaches or assessors, and I'm going to speak from Cal South and from the places I've been, on the regional level, some of these guys have been assessors for a millennia. They've been through the whole, You used to be a fault finder, find every mistake, and then they've slowly moved the bar up to being a coach and to being somebody that's helping a referee. You might not agree with what they said. They might have an old interpretation still stuck in their head. Don't argue with them. And sometimes the best thing to say, okay, I understand, and nod your head, and then we can move on from it. The last bullet point here, ask more questions. This is a loaded gun. If you're going to ask a question, make sure you're asking it in a tone that shows you're trying to learn and not trying to refute the information from an assessor. Don't ask the question, this is what I was told. Why are you saying this when I've been told this from somebody else? We're all going to see people are going to say different things over the same situation. We've seen this on numerous, you go on any referee, group on Facebook, and they'll show a video and you'll see 500 comments and half of them say red card, half of them say yellow card. No one's going to agree every single time. Be very careful how you ask questions in this. It's important to let the assessor know that you're asking questions because you don't understand or because you're trying to learn, not that you're trying to challenge them. Some assessors have very, very thin skin after being referees for a million years. So that's very, very important. That's the main thing I wanted to cover there.
Good stuff, Vince. Kevin, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, like Vince said, and the best way I've ever been not questioned but asked that is to have a referee say, "Can you help me to understand better how you are saying that?" Because one, it shows me that you really want to know. And two, it shows me it's not a challenge, it's a genuine ask for clarification. And the new mentor path is to help lead referees to come to their own conclusions in a successful way. So asking additional questions is absolutely the most important part about it. I'll sit and talk for an hour and a half with a crew of referees that are engaged and truly want to know or want to understand better. To the same vein, like you said, if they want to argue, I'm like, well, thank guys, and put it in my backpack and walk to the next field, because I've probably got 9 more games I'm going to mentor that day. So good stuff.
So at this point, we are going to move to the Q&A. I am going to list all of the video sources that were included in this presentation. I'm not going to say where they were from. Again, if you would like to take a stab at the bounty, that's great. Go for it. But the first person who gets it in before 11, I will be sending a check. So do we have any questions that we can answer? Things that we said, people want to ask about? We're here. We've dazzled everyone into submission. I'm okay with that too. There's been a request for a copy of the slides, which I will go ahead and do. Justin's asking, how do you know when you're ready for your first assessment? Kevin, go.
Do you have a referee badge?
Sorry?
You took it right out of my mouth.
You're ready for your first assessment, your very first game, you have a referee. And that is an honest and true answer. Be frank, be upfront with the assessor and say, hey, this is my 4th or 5th game. Can you watch and just give me some advice? That's going to be a very different conversation than the regional who's trying to upgrade. You will never learn anything if you are not getting feedback from someone. If you're a new referee in a rec league, find that older referee that's been doing it for 10 years. If you don't want a formal mentored assessment, but don't be afraid of it. It's a tool. It is a hugely successful tool if you want to be a successful referee, to engage a mentor and go through the assessment process. It's not anything to be scared of.
I'm going to take that a step further. I'm assuming that if you're here in this meeting, you want to get better. You have a couple of different types of referees. You have some referees that they're about the money and they just need to make money. It's a side job. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not slamming those people at all. Some people need to do that. Assigners need those people too to fill games. If you're looking to get better in any way, shape, or form, the two biggest things that I could say to do is, one, find somebody that is either started around the same time that you did, or somebody that's a little bit better, or somebody that's a little bit more seasoned. Become friends with them and challenge each other to be better. Whether you're questioning stuff in the laws of the game, you're watching videos together, have that banter back and forth, the breakdown videos together. That is huge. If you want to get better, if you want to upgrade, I say as soon as your state association says that you're eligible for the upgrade, go for it. The worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to have that situation where it doesn't work out for you. Again, failure is an event, not a person. So if you're not successful, go ahead and, take the feedback that you got and then go step up and try it again when you think you're ready again.
Cool. I'm going to just call my own number. With respect to when you know you're ready for an assessment, typically when you need one for an upgrade, or if you need one for a maintenance, it's time to face the battle and to do your best. But more importantly, talk to your assigner and saying, hey, I'd like to get some positive feedback to let me know if I'm on the right path, or if there are things that I need to work on before I invest the money in the cost of an assessment, and make sure that I'm on the right path. And most of us are reasonable people. We want you all to do well. All right, next question from Adonia Chamberlain from Maryland. Is it a good idea to request an assessment for a league that you're very familiar with, given that you know the rules pretty well and have worked with some of the referees before?
I'm going to take this one.
Vince.
I'm going to take this one. If you're looking just to get a passing grade so you can move on, yes. Simple answer. I take it a step further. I take every game as though somebody's going to be assessing the game. So in my mindset, I don't care what the game is. I don't care if it's a U12 or USL championship game. I'm taking it as somebody's going to watch it, because you're going to be on YouTube. Some parents taping the game. If you are not providing, 100% effort, or if you're dogging it, or you make a calamity of errors, it's going to be known. And so I understand the concept of saying you want to do something from a rules of competition standpoint. Yes, I think it's important that you know the rules of competition before you go out and do an assessment, do something you're comfortable with. But when the development academy was doing their playoffs or their showcase games, you would show up there, you would get an assignment with two people from two different states you've never worked with before, and you had 20 minutes to get a pregame together, and every game was being seen by a national ref coach. So being able to adapt to that information is still very important as well. You need to get out of the comfort zone of saying, I'm just going to work with my friends. I'm just going to work in the comfort of my own league that I know. Because yes, you'll get passing scores and you can move, but you'll never get better as a referee, depending on what you're trying to accomplish.
And be careful. If you've ever heard the phrase familiarity breeds contempt, it's not, you may think you know that league, and you may think you know the players, and you're comfortable with the rules of competition and this and that. Those are the kind of matches that can blow up because you get complacent. And also, if I'm watching it, especially if it's on an upgrade type situation, I'm watching it and you're buddying with all the players like you might get away with on a Friday night, I'm not going to look as kindly to that. So there are, I guess, to round off that conversation, is there's pros and cons to doing that.
Okay, story time here, just to say it because you mentioned it. My very first assessment, grade 8 to grade 7, I refereed a game in which a team I used to coach, thinking that exact same concept, that I would be easy because I know the team. I had 11 cautions. And the only reason I passed at the time was because it was an evaluation, not an assessment. And at the time you couldn't fail it, but it was a miserable game. So I completely understand of being very, very comfortable with players. Not always a good thing.
Well said, Vince. Justin asks, aren't most assessments done in adult matches? So wouldn't you have to be comfortable enough in adult matches? And the answer is no. Because every time you do a match, you're being watched. We also routinely see assessments and mentoring being done on youth matches all over the place. It is a good idea to get acclimated to the type of match you want to be assessed with before you actually get the assessment done. You don't want to find out that you're not used to having a stadium full of thousands of people for the first time when you're doing a professional match, and that's where the assessment is, and you find out that your comms aren't working properly. Bad idea.
Hey, Jesse, put up that first slide you put up about the different types of assessments.
Yeah, on it. And then you can start talking about comfort levels, Kevin.
Yeah, I think that could help solve the question too. But yeah, you absolutely want to be comfortable with the level of match. But I want you to separate, a mentor versus an assessment that's for an upgrade or for a maintenance assessment at the regional level. You can still have a formal assessment, but not, it could be a U14 game. It could be a U15 game. Whatever level you're comfortable enough to do. I wouldn't go out and get a mentor on my first U18-19 game, or my first U16 game, or my first U17 game. So yeah, to some degree, you want to be comfortable with the level that you're refereeing. But as Jesse put this up, keep in mind, we're cutting these into 3 different categories. A formal USSF assessment, which is required for a regional upgrade or a national upgrade or a regional maintenance. Then you've got the majority of what the folks on here are looking at is developmental guidance and feedback and a training match watch situation. So the only ones that have to be on an adult match are if you're upgrading to regional. That is it.
And again, that varies by states. States get to make their decisions on what they count for regional.
Absolutely. Very good point, Vincent.
Yeah. Some states will allow a U17 or a U16 game for a regional badge. But for nationals, it's adult matches.
Yeah, like in West Virginia, we will allow one of your assessments for upgrade to be U19, but nothing below that. But like you said, each is up to the regional level, guys. Those decisions are made at the state association level as to who gets. There's a framework, but who is allowed a regional badge is decided by the state associations.
I think U17 matches should count for those because I think those are tougher than the U19s.
They're tougher management. I guarantee you that. Yeah. Player management.
I'm going to take the next question here. I think it's the next one. Is that the one on the
point grades?
The grades. This is going to get me in trouble. To answer the question on grades, it's an arbitrary number, and I say that loosely. I've seen one score above 80 in 33 years. So we're really looking at a score level between 70 and we'll say between 70 and 80. The way that it's supposed to work is you have a starting score depending on the competitiveness of the game. For instance, a U19 game that's kind of competitive, you're going to start at a 72. On a highly competitive adult match, you're going to start at a 75. And typically, depending on how you do in your match, you're going to fluctuate for positive points, negative points on how your score is going to end up. That's the way it's supposed to work. That does not mean that's the way it works for most of these, most of the regional assessors out there, even some of the national ref coaches out there, to be honest with you. Typically, you're going to see scores. If it's an easy match and you survived and nothing happened, you're going to see a 70. If you did really, really well, you're going to see somewhere between 73 and 76. And if you just did, middle of the road, okay, you're going to see around a 72. That's typically your range. Now, if you have a game that's really, really crazy and you have 15 key match incidents, you might get a 78 or 79. I said I have 175 assessments. 100 of them are national assessments, and the highest grade I have is a 79. And I didn't earn it. The game didn't earn it. I don't know how I got the score. So to answer your question, it's kind of arbitrary, but the guideline is start at 72 to 75, depending on the competitive of the match, and adjust based on the referee's performance.
So I have a comment here also, just to piggyback on Vince. And it probably will get me into trouble, but I'll just say it anyway. Who cares? I mean, if you think about it from a standpoint of your college GPA or a high school GPA, whether or not you have a GPA of 3.5 and somebody else has a 3.4 or a 3.6, it's whether or not it meets your needs and helps you demonstrate your mastery. If it passes, great. Now,
They don't put your GPA. They don't put your GPA on your degree.
Right, but I mean, the only real differential that I can fathom, and I'm happy to be wrong on this point, is if there's a cutoff point where a state is looking for a certain number of people that can put into a delegation for a U.S. soccer event, and then they actually do need to rank everyone who had the last passing assessment for upgrade that they did. To me, that's the only thing that really makes sense. From the standpoint of the assigner, though, aside from U.S. Soccer, nobody else can see those grades. They are 100% between the referee and the assessor, the state director of assessment, and in Chicago, the U.S. Soccer headquarters.
That's the important part there, is that the scores, you're better off having more assessments at 72 than to have 2 assessments at 78. So the key is that when you're looking at now, mind you, when it comes to, trying to apply for national camp and become a national referee, they look at your entire referee portfolio. So they're going to look not only at the scores, but more importantly, they're going to look at the number of games that you had assessed over the previous year and what level those games were. That's more important to them than your scores. And the reason for that is because a lot of these people at the selection committee know that some of these scores aren't the same uniformly throughout the country. So they're going to see somebody who has 7 or 8 assessments in a year that, the minimum requirement is 3, but they're going to see somebody has 7 or 8 assessments and 6 of them are, say, U19 games, versus somebody who might have 5 assessments, but they're all USL 1, USL Championship, or USL 2 games. So that person, even though he might have lower scores, he was on more competitive games and he still passed. So they're going to look at that person probably a little bit more favorably than the person who's done more assessments, but on less, higher scores, but on less, difficult games. So it's kind of hard to say what they're looking for at the national level, because I've seen people with the bare minimum get in. I've seen people that have had 10 or 11 assessments not get in. So it really, the score is irrelevant. It's a pass fail. Did you pass? Did you fail it? What was the level of game you have? If you're looking to become a national referee and you're looking to go down that route, you're going to have a mentor in your pocket. You're going to have somebody to talk to on a lot of stuff. Not just your assessment games, but you're going to have to do a volume of them, not just the minimum.
Thanks, Vince. Next comment from Tyler. All right, Larry Middleman from the Maryland SDI is holding a mentoring tournament this weekend. Great. Quincy's making an observation about his score on an assessment. Thank you, Quincy. Cool. We are again have exhausted the number of questions that we know about.
If you guys have any questions, feel free. Jesse put up contact info at the beginning of the presentation. Feel free to send me an email.
Well, I posted the whole slide deck in the chat. People can download it.
I do recommend that if you do work with multiple assigners and you get an assessment from one, once you get the results back, let your other assigners know. It's kind of unfortunate that this information is not shared with the assigners. but it needs to be shared more uniformly. So if you got, you know, in Southern California, we have 50 different assigners that we use because we have so many games. So it's kind of hard to say, you know, you get an assessment, kind of let them know what you've done.
Justin wants to know about where's the slide deck. I'm going to post it again. The slide deck and this entire Zoom is going to be recorded and posted up on YouTube within the next 3 days. And have at it. If for some reason you can't find it on YouTube, you can always email me at wahooref@gmail.com and I will send them to you. I will also post them on my website, dcreferees.com. Hopefully people got to see the slide deck again. Akash has a question. Are there assessments for U17 and below?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Tyler, to answer your question, Bob Sabello was my assessor last night.
He was my mentor back in California for a decade.
He's one of the nicest people on the planet.
Most definitely. I'm definitely one of the most smartest officials you'll ever meet too.
So since we're plugging shamelessly websites for Jesse, YouTube page, Key Match Incident, go find it. That's my page. Has video clips there for you to go break down if you want to. Also KMI on Facebook. So go ahead and take a look at those.
I strongly recommend Vince's YouTube channel. It is a wealth of information and a good way for you to test yourself on scenarios that haven't happened to you yet. Because if you figure out what it's like beforehand, hopefully you'll have a better outcome when it happens to you on your field. Because there's very, very, very little that is brand new and has never been seen before.
You say that, and as soon as I say that, it happens the next week.
Well, sure. But the idea being is if you think about it before it happens, when it actually happens, you don't need to think about it again once you've established that you're looking and seeing things that you've already done and have already been processed. And that's why we prepare, because then the execution is already on autopilot to some extent. Good question, Akash. Excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for tonight. We'll make sure to give Ty a hard time because he missed the presentation with his heat delay in Kentucky. But I wanted to thank all the mentors who are here tonight. I think that we can all agree that Kevin Nicholson, Vince DiNardo were excellent. I am very, very proud and honored that they were a part of this. I want to thank everyone who joined this presentation tonight in the audience, and I hope that this will be helpful. And if you're interested in learning more about this or in getting assignments in the DC metro area, or have a question you want to just float, we'll be happy to great group of people together and crowdsource an answer for you, because we're all about growing our capabilities as a community and paying it forward.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you very, very, very much. And I hope everybody has a good night.